The dust settled in lazy spirals across the wooden floorboards of the Iron Horse saloon, catching the afternoon light that sliced through gaps in the shutters. Jake Morrison sat at his usual corner table, hat pulled low, nursing a whiskey that had gone warm an hour ago. He'd been in Silver Creek for 3 days now, and in those 3 days he'd learned 2 things. The town was dying, and nobody wanted to talk about why. The saloon door swung open with its familiar creak, and Jake didn't bother looking up. Probably another drifter passing through, or one of the ranch hands coming in early to forget whatever troubles gnawed at them. But then came a sound that didn't belong in Silver Creek, Arizona territory. The soft padding of silk slippers on rough wood, and a voice speaking in rapid, musical Cantonese. Jake's eyes lifted. A young Chinese woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright street behind her. She wore a traditional kipao of deep blue silk, embroidered with golden phoenixes. Her long black hair pulled back in an elaborate arrangement held by jade pins. In her hands, she carried a large wicker basket covered with a red cloth. She couldn't have been more than 20, 3 years old, and she looked about as out of place in the Iron Horse as a rose in a cactus patch. The saloon went quiet. 6 men at the bar turned to stare. 2 card players froze mid-deal. Even Pete, the bartender who'd seen just about everything in his 60-odd years, stopped wiping the glass in his hand. The woman's dark eyes swept the room with a mixture of determination and barely concealed nervousness. She spoke again, this time in accented but clear English. "I am looking for workers, railroad workers. I have food. Railroad's been shut down for 2 weeks, honey." One of the men at the bar called out, his tone not unkind but tinged with pity. Company pulled out, said the route wasn't profitable no more. The woman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The workers are still here. They still need to eat. Chinamen don't come into town much," another man offered. "They keep to their camp up past the ridge. I know where they are." The woman said quietly, "I am asking if anyone here has seen them today, if they have come looking for food." Jake watched this exchange with growing interest. The woman had courage, he'd give her that. Walking into a saloon full of rough men, alone, asking questions. Either she was desperate, or she had more steel in her spine than her delicate appearance suggested. Probably both. "Nobody's seen him," Pete said, his tone gentler than the others. "But if you're selling food, miss, you might find customers right here. Been a while since we had anything that wasn't beans and salt pork." The woman shook her head firmly. "This food is for the Chinese workers. They are my people. Your people are starving, from what I hear." A grizzled prospector muttered from the corner. "Company didn't pay 'em for the last month before they left, and the general store won't give 'em credit no more." Something flickered across the woman's face. Anger, perhaps, or pain, but she mastered it quickly. "That is why I cook. Someone must." She turned to leave, but Jake found himself speaking before he'd fully decided to. "How much?" The woman stopped, turning back. Her eyes found his for the first time, and Jake was struck by the intelligence in them, sharp and assessing. "What? How much for the food?" Jake pushed his hat back, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'll buy some." Her expression shifted, becoming guarded. "I told you, this food is for—" "I heard you the first time. I'm asking anyway." Jake stood, his spurs chiming softly. He was tall, lean in the way of men who lived hard lives, with gray just starting to thread through the dark hair at his temples. His gun belt hung low on his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of someone who knew how to use it. "Been eating Pete's cooking for 3 days. No offense, Pete. None taken," the bartender grunted. "My cooking tastes like leather and regret." The woman studied Jake for a long moment. Something in her expression suggested she was seeing more than just another gunslinger, reading him the way he'd learned to read other men looking for the truth beneath the surface. Whatever she saw must not have entirely displeased her, because she moved closer, though she kept the basket held protectively against her body. "You have money?" she asked bluntly. Jake reached into his vest pocket and produced a silver dollar, setting it on the table with a soft clink. "That cover it?" The woman's eyes widened slightly. It was too much, they both knew it. A meal shouldn't cost more than 2 bits, maybe 4 if it was fancy. But she recovered quickly, her chin lifting. "I do not take charity. Not charity, payment for good food." Jake gestured to the chair across from him. "You cook it yourself?" "Yes." "Then I'm betting it's worth $1. Might be worth 2, but let's start with 1 and see." He sat back down, watching her. "Name's Jake Morrison." The woman hesitated, then seemed to come to some internal decision. She moved to his table, but didn't sit, instead carefully uncovering her basket. The aroma that wafted out made every man in the saloon turn and stare. It was unlike anything Jake had smelled in years: ginger and star anise, soy sauce, and something sweet and complex he couldn't identify. His mouth watered instantly. From the basket she produced a ceramic container, still warm, and a pair of wooden chopsticks wrapped in cloth. She set them before him with precise, careful movements, then looked at him directly. "My name is Lin May, and I must tell you something before you eat." "I'm listening." "Do not taste my food if you are not serious," she said, her English taking on a formal, careful quality. "Do not eat it because you are curious or because you pity me. This food is made with intention, with memory. It is not just for filling the stomach." Jake tilted his head, intrigued. "That's so. My mother taught me to cook in Guangdong province before we came to America. She said that food prepared with care carries the spirit of the one who makes it. When you eat, you take in not just the meal, but the story, the feeling, the purpose behind it." Lin May's eyes were fierce now, her nervousness burned away by conviction. "This food is meant to remind my people of home, to give them strength, to tell them they are not forgotten. If you do not understand this, if you will taste it and make jokes or throw it away, then I do not want your dollar." The saloon had gone completely silent. Even the usual sounds from the street seemed muted. Jake looked at the container in front of him, then back at Lin May. He thought about a lot of things in that moment about the Chinese workers he'd seen around various camps and towns, always kept separate, always paid less, always the first to be abandoned when things went south. He thought about the way this young woman stood here, alone and proud, trying to feed her people with nothing but her skill and her determination. He thought about his own mother, dead 20 years now, and how she'd cooked for him and his sisters even when they had almost nothing, making magic out of scraps. "I understand," he said quietly. Lin May searched his face once more, then gave a small nod. She unwrapped the chopsticks and handed them to him, but he shook his head. "Never learned to use those properly. Got a fork." A tiny smile ghosted across her lips, the first he'd seen from her. From the basket, she produced a simple wooden spoon and exchanged it for the chopsticks. Then she stepped back, watching him with an intensity that felt like a test. Jake opened the container. Inside was a dish of braised pork belly over rice, the meat cut in perfect cubes, glazed in a dark, lustrous sauce. There were vegetables he didn't recognize, and the steam that rose carried that incredible aroma again, stronger now, filling his senses. He took the spoon, cut a piece of the pork, included some rice, and brought it to his mouth. The moment it touched his tongue, Jake went completely still. It wasn't just the taste, though that was extraordinary, the pork tender enough to melt. The sauce, a perfect balance of sweet, salty, and something deeply savory that seemed to resonate in his bones. It wasn't just the way the flavors built and evolved as he chewed, each bite revealing new layers. It was something else, something he didn't have words for. It was like tasting comfort itself, like being wrapped in a warmth that went beyond the physical. It was home, though not his home. It was love, translated into food, and it was sadness too. A profound, aching homesickness that Lin May had somehow captured and contained in this dish. He could taste her longing for a place she'd left behind, her worry for the men who depended on her, her determination to hold on to something essential in a place that wanted to strip it away. Jake swallowed. He set the spoon down carefully, precisely. He didn't touch the container again. Instead, he looked up at Lin May, and for the first time since he'd killed his last man 6 months ago, he felt something crack in the careful armor he'd built around himself. "Got him," he whispered. Lin May's expression flickered surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "You understand now." It wasn't a question. Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, I understand." He picked up the spoon again and continued eating, but differently now. Slowly, respectfully, savoring each bite not for pleasure, but for what it represented, a gift freely given, of memory and hope and stubborn, defiant care. Around him, the saloon remained quiet, the other men watching with a mixture of curiosity and confusion, unable to understand what had just passed between the gunslinger and the Chinese girl, but sensing it nonetheless. When Jake finished, he set the spoon down and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You make that every day. Every day that I can get ingredients. It is not easy. The general store." She stopped, pressing her lips together. "Won't sell to you," Jake finished, "or charges you triple, 4 times, sometimes more." Her hands tightened on the basket handle. "I have money saved, but it runs out. Soon I will have nothing left to cook with." Jake reached into his vest and pulled out 3 more silver dollars, stacking them next to the first. Lin May's eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. "No, I told you I do not charity." Jake interrupted. "A business proposition. I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Edmonds at the general store. Going to explain to him that he's going to sell you ingredients at fair prices from now on. I'm going to be real convincing about it." His voice was flat matter, of fact, but there was something underneath it that made Lin May draw a sharp breath. "After that, I want you to cook for those railroad workers of yours. Every day, feed them proper, and once a week, you cook for me too. These $4 are payment for this month. We got a deal." "Why?" The word came out almost a whisper. "Why would you do this?" Jake was quiet for a moment, looking down at his empty container. "You asked me not to taste your food unless I was serious. Well, I'm serious now. Serious about making sure you can keep cooking it. Serious about—" He trailed off, searching for words, "about standing for something that matters. Even if it's just one meal at a time." Lin May sat down then, finally, in the chair across from him. Her eyes were bright, and Jake realized with some alarm that she was fighting tears. "Workers," she said, her voice unsteady, "they are dying, not quickly but slowly, from hunger, from hopelessness, from the way this country breaks them down piece by piece. Some have already left, walking to the next town, the next railroad, hoping for something better. But many are too sick, too weak. They have nowhere to go, and I am just one person with a basket of food. You're one person who hasn't given up." Jake said, "That counts for something, does it?" She looked at him directly, and he saw all the weight she carried in that gaze, the responsibility, the fear, the exhaustion of fighting a battle she couldn't win. "Does it count when they still go hungry, when they still die?" Jake thought about that. He thought about all the things he'd tried to stand for over the years, all the fights he'd picked and the causes he'd championed. He thought about how most of them had ended in blood and dust and broken promises. He thought about the man he'd been versus the man he'd become, and the long, lonely road between them. Yeah, he said finally, it counts. Maybe not in the way you want it to. Maybe not enough. But it counts. Lin May was silent for a long time. Outside, the light had shifted, the afternoon sliding toward evening. Finally, she reached out and took the $4 silver, closing her fingers around them. I will cook for you, every week, but not here. You will come to the camp, to where my people are. You will eat with them, and you will see them. Will you do this? Jake understood what she was really asking, not for him to hide in the saloon where it was comfortable and familiar, but to cross the invisible line that divided Silver Creek between white and Chinese, between belonging and exile, to be seen standing with them, even if only for a meal. Yeah, he said, I'll do that. Lin May nodded once, sharp and decisive, like a contract being sealed. She stood, gathering her basket. Tomorrow, at sunset. The camp is past the ridge, where the old rail bed ends. Do you know it? I'll find it. She turned to go, then paused. Mr. Morrison, the thing you said you would do. With the store owner. Yeah. Do not kill him. Her voice was firm. I need him alive to sell me food. Jake felt one corner of his mouth quirk up, the closest he'd come to a smile in months. I'll be gentle. Gentle like how? She pressed. You have a gun. I have lots of things, Jake replied. Guns just the one people notice. He met her eyes. I won't kill him, Miss Lin. You have my word on that. She studied him once more, then nodded. Good. Because I have already had to clean up too many messes in this town. I do not need another. And with that cryptic statement, she walked out of the saloon, her silk slippers whispering across the floor, the basket swinging gently at her side. The moment the door closed behind her, the saloon exploded into conversation. Men turned to Jake, throwing questions and comments, but he ignored them all. He stood, dropped a few coins on the table for Pete, and headed for the door himself. He had a visit to make to the general store, and then he had to figure out exactly what he'd just gotten himself into. Because Jake Morrison, despite what Lin May might think, wasn't a good man. He'd killed 16 men over the years, some in fair fights and some in fights that were fair enough for government work. He'd ridden with bad men and done bad things, and he'd spent the last 6 months drifting from town to town trying to outrun the weight of it all. He wasn't anyone's hero. He wasn't anyone's savior. But he'd tasted something in that food, something he thought he'd lost forever. The possibility that small acts of care could matter in a world bent on grinding everyone down. Lin May had reminded him, with nothing but her stubborn determination and her mother's recipes, that there were still things worth fighting for, worth standing up for, even if you knew you couldn't win, especially then, and if a broken-down gunslinger with too much blood on his hands could help one young woman feed her people for a while longer, well, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could hope for. To find one small thing to stand for, and to stand for it as long as you could. Jake stepped out into the fading light, adjusting his hat against the sun. Tomorrow at sunset, he'd promised, he'd be there, and in the meantime, he had a store owner to have a conversation with. Behind him, through the saloon's open door, he could hear Pete starting to tell the story to the men who'd missed it. About the Chinese girl who'd walked in brave as brass, and the gunslinger who'd tasted her food and gone quiet. Jake let them talk. Stories had a way of taking on their own life anyway, growing and changing with each telling. What mattered was what happened next. What mattered was following through. He walked down the dusty street toward Edmund's general store, his spurs chiming softly in rhythm with his steps, and for the first time in a long time, Jake Morrison felt like he might be walking toward something instead of just away.